Welcome everybody to episode 30 of Ask a Pro. My name is David Donahue. I am the founder of the ADU University. I'm the owner of YIMBY ADU, Yes in My Backyard, accessory dwelling units. And I also have a manufactured home dealership, MH Properties and Investments. And I've been in the business for, 24 years, give or take. But joining me is John Arendsen, who is a even longer tenured manufactured home professional and who has been probably one of the most highly regarded in the manufactured and the factory built housing world in Southern California. And I am really excited that you're here, and thank you for your time today, John.
Thanks an awful lot, Dave. What a great intro. Can I use you anytime I need an intro?
I'm a great MC. I'm good in front of people.
Boy, I didn't know all that stuff about myself.
No, it is fantastic. So everybody that's here, thank you very much. And if you're watching or listening to this, if you're here with us live, feel free to put questions into the chat or into the Q&A. We're going to find them wherever we can. And if you're watching a recording, wherever this is posted, you're going to have our contact information. So feel free to reach out to us. If it's something that's going to be on YouTube, and it will be in the future, then you can put comments in there and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. This session of Ask a Pro is going to be talking with John, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and talk about your background before we jump into it. But we're going to be talking about factory built or manufactured, what we call manufactured accessory dwelling units. They're built to the HUD code, and how that compares to a site built or conventionally constructed ADU that someone might be looking at. But so before we jump into that, John, please share a little bit about your background.
Well, I jumped into this business kind of by default. I had 5 kids and a mortgage, and I just moved to San Diego from Orange County back in the 80s when we were having those 18 to 21% interest rates. And I had a real downturn in a business that I owned up there. So I had to jump into something. I started working with a contractor that was in the business of leveling and re-leveling manufactured homes and installing earthquake braces. So wow. That's where my career began. I was an earthquake bracing peddler for a few months. And my wife, I promised her I would never be an entrepreneur again. I would only go to work for companies where I had a guaranteed salary and benefits and all those kinds of things. But after 3 or 4 months working with this company, the guy was such a crook that my wife finally woke up one night and said, "Hon, start your own business." And that's how it all started. We started with the General Contractor. Well, I started as a contractor. The first name I ever had was MOMS, Mobile Home Maintenance and Repair.
Oh,
my wife hated it. She said, "That is the worst name I've ever heard in my life." So I woke up straight out of a dead sleep one night and I said, "Honey, I've got it." She goes, "What's that?" "On the level." She goes, "On the level. That's it. Perfect." So therein lies that story. We started out as a general contractor. A year later, I found out that I was getting a lot of heat from my competition because I didn't have a manufactured home contractor's license. So in 1987 or 88, I think it was, I got my manufactured home contractor's license. And then we were up in Simi Valley in 1993 at the earthquake. I was doing about 1,000 or 2 projects up there, removing old homes, putting new ones in, that type of thing. And I had the only boneyard up there. I had the only place where you could take the totaled out manufactured homes and put them in a storage facility. And I started dishing them off to people from the San Fernando Valley from the San Joaquin Valley, right, Central Coast, that needed housing for some of their workers. And then I had other people from Mexico coming up and wanting to put them as housing down there. Sure. Anyway, long story short, I got complaints from my competitors that I was dealing in manufactured homes without a dealer's license. So voila, I had to get my dealer's license. Then I got down the road a little further and I realized that we were doing a lot of stuff on site-built, land-owned home type projects as opposed to just manufactured home parks and developments. So I got my real estate license. And then 2 years later, I didn't want to be beholden to a broker. So I backed into my own real estate broker's license. And most recently, I got my DMV license to sell tiny homes and park models. So basically, we wear all the badges because we provide all the services, and we want to be as flexible as we possibly can without having to really outreach and depend on a lot of other people. So in 30 words or less, David, there's your answer.
John, thank you for that. It's interesting because as one of the topics I'd like us to cover is the difference between, again, site built and factory built products. And I just heard you say that you have your DMV license to be able, which is required to sell park models or what are commonly called tiny homes. So tiny homes, you can be able to sell those. So those are under the recreational vehicle codes. That's what they're being built to. So the RV codes, the ANSI code. So that's one. You also have your general contractor's license, which is 2. You have your C47 contractor's license to be able to install manufactured homes. So that's 3. And you also have your broker and real estate license. So that's almost 5. Particular sort of, specialties that really all falls within the factory built manufactured home arena.
Absolutely.
I shared with you before we started this recording, I was at the California Association of Realtors annual convention in Anaheim. And I was asked to speak, and they said, what topic would you like to talk about? And I said, factory built versus stick built. Well, I was early in the morning, just around 9 o'clock. So when you're the first speaker, you don't expect a lot of people to show up. Well, in a room with about 120 capacity, there was about 125 people in there.
Wow,
at that point in the morning. And it was interesting because everybody, all of these agents from all over California were hungry for information on ADUs. And I asked them the question, how many of you have ever spoken to a manufactured home dealer? Packed room. 3 hands went up. Of over 100 people, how many people had talked to a manufactured home dealer? And what it did when those 3 people put their hands up really supported and substantiated what I wanted to talk about. The difference between ADUs, whether you're doing it stick built, talking to an architect and a designer, and then talking to a general contractor, having to do all those building permits, and for this very involved process. They're usually just in that one silo. And the silo, that's where they live. And they never, very, very rarely, ever look into the second silo, which is going to be factory built manufactured homes. And so even though you have 5 licenses, you have 5 things that you work within, it is still a very small niche market. Would you agree?
Totally.
And that's where I wanted to try to educate and give a resource to people to understand more about what a factory built ADU can do, because it's my opinion, and I'd like you to either, agree or disagree, and whatever, that's fine, is that I think you're going to build it in half the time, have a factory built ADU is going to get done in about a year or less, and you could save, I'd say 20% in costs. Would you agree or disagree? And
no,
you might
at least 20%, if not more. You're being very conservative there.
Yes, and I want to be conservative because when I did a bid recently for somebody to do a 700 square foot ADU, and I got bids because I wanted to be as sincere as possible. I got one from a general contractor, and I gave them mine. The general contractor's was $250, and mine was $200. There was a $50,000 savings, and I told them, you'll be able to get this done in under a year if you make the decisions quickly. And they're like, okay, where do I sign up? I said, well, let's have a conversation. Let's get this thing going. So that was the exciting part of it, to educate. So again, if you're with us, if you're going to be watching this or listening to it in the future, I do welcome you to kind of look into a factory built ADU as something, as an option for an accessory dwelling unit. And to do that, to start it off, John, when somebody contacts your company, which is Crest Backyard Homes, correct?
Yep.
So if they contact you, what is it like? What are the first things that you're going to want to talk to them about? What are some normal questions that they ask? Just kind of help paint a picture for people of what they're going to experience when contacting the Crest Backyard Homes?
Well, we have a kind of a protocol that we've established, and it usually starts with the initial inquiry, or what we call intake. If somebody contacts us by email, we have a little intake form. I'm sure you have one as well, that just name, rank, and serial number, right?
Right.
Just your basic essentials. But that also gives us, and you probably have the same little mechanism because you're on Google, I'm sure, to map it, right? So you can hit that little prompt that brings the map up, and then you can get kind of probably 100-year-old photograph of what the house looked like.
Yes.
When the first time Google did their drive-by and their aerial shot. So that gives you some connective tissue to the project. And that's where we start. Then we'll look that over. We'll find out what the viability and the proximity, basically where they want to put their home or where the most desirable location would be. And we do that before we even contact them. And then once we've kind of done that little overview, we'll send them a little email, and we'll tell them that we'd like to kind of schedule a phone chat with them, and that'll be our next step. So you get the intake form, then you get the phone chat. And then with the phone chat, we usually try to qualify the client one way or the other, with their budget, their timing, the type, size, style of home they want. We let them know right off the bat, we only do manufactured. If they want to do other than manufactured, we have resources that we can refer them to within our own family, and oftentimes end up doing that. Once we've done the basic preliminary phone chat and we feel that there's an opportunity to move forward with them, we'll schedule a Zoom meeting with our team. And it's basically not our entire team, but basically our field evaluation project management team. And you met Lenska, you had her on your show before.
Yes.
She's our project manager. She's stellar. She's amazing. I've known Lenska for 15 years. It took me about 10 years to get her to come aboard and join our team. Stubborn little German gal that she is, but we finally had her. We've had her with us now for about 3, probably 4 years, and she's just done wonderful. She's taken the bull by the horn. She does it all. She goes out, gets the permit. She goes out with her drone. Lenska is a licensed drone pilot as well as a fixed wing pilot, so she can do either or. And one of her little sidelines is to do real estate overviews. She'll do real estate photography. So she does that drone. We give the best site evaluation in the business, barring none. It's a 30+ page, very detailed, very comprehensive site evaluation, and that goes to the homeowner. We charge them. We charge about $500 for that. But I'll tell you what, I've never met anybody yet that didn't think that was well worth it, because whether they end up going with us or not, that becomes their intellectual property. They can take it to another developer or another ADU contractor or purveyor and use that information. And that information, if that purveyor charges them 1 penny for another evaluation, other than maybe just to go out and take their own physical look, because I don't blame anybody for not wanting to go out and take their own peek. But anyway, that's our next step. And then once they get the site evaluation, if they're happy with that, we then schedule another Zoom meeting with our production team. And that is my partner, Tim Hips, who basically he's the liaison between the manufacturers that we use and the field. He coordinates the transportation. He coordinates the installation and setup of the home. He basically works one-on-one with the client, line item per line item, details every single thing that client wants. And then we have a roundhouse with our whole team and the client, and we go. It's a very arduous process. Takes us a couple of hours to go through it, but the devil's in the details, David.
It is.
And even though we go through all those arduous steps, once it gets into production, then it's a fait accompli. Then it's very hard to change your mind at the last minute.
Right.
And if you do, it's pretty costly for the client to do so. Then once the product is delivered, there's still issues that you got to deal with after the installation. But anyway, I hope that made some sense to you. There's a
It did, and it
chronological
also brings
order.
up a lot of questions because I want people to
Sure.
understand, because John packed a lot into that. One, the site evaluation, the site which Lenska is going to do, and yes, she is wonderful. I do want to give her a compliment because when I was at the California Association of Realtors yesterday, I was with a lender who works with your company and said nothing but wonderful things about Lenska, because it talks about the total her ability to be able to see things through and take responsibility. Now, I say that last part very seriously, because a professional, you have to take responsibility. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been working with people to go, well, that just wasn't my fault. I'm like, well, it kind of was what you said you'd work on and be in control of or manage. So even though you're maybe a contractor or a sub, and to blame somebody else when it's your job is unfortunate. So I've heard a lot of really good things about Lenska, and I think she is a great person. The site evaluation, the charge and the intellectual property, I think that's a really critical tool. And like you said, you're going to spend the money, and you need to spend the money to have that done, to understand the aspects from a professional. It is going to take someone like Lenska, all day to get out there, do the drone shots, do the photographs, confirming all the site specifications, then to go back and then put together a 30-page evaluation. That's a lot of time by a professional who you really want to get it. That is going to be money very well spent. The other part of it, the next step, this is where you get into big differences between manufactured homes and the working with an architect and designer, is that you're going to go in and not only you're going to have a floor plan, and that floor plan, you guys are going to say, this fits, this will work on your property, because you've already had the property evaluation, the sizes and the restrictions. And then they're going to be able to decide on the options of what they want inside of it. So you're actually in that. So right now we're kind of paralleling what an architect or a designer would do.
Correct.
Floor plans, interior, exterior options, features, fixtures. You're kind of going down this nice clean line. And you said at the moment that Tim becomes involved, that's after the order has basically been signed off. That's what I want. I'm okay with all that price, because once you sign it off, this is right where those two parallel tracks really diverge. They really split out, because once it goes to the factory, that factory is going to build it just the way that you wanted it. And once it's done, it's basically done. You have your walls, your floors, your roof, your ceilings, your electrical, your plumbing, your appliances, your countertop, most of the time your flooring, windows, doors, all of those things are going to be delivered to your home and either tractored in place, or, which I love the pictures of the way that the cranes are placing it on the foundation system and moving, and it's like, okay, you have almost a completely finished ADU being delivered in maybe 3 months after you signed it off. So that's where it really kind of, splits, because if you're working with an architect or a designer, and you then go to permits, and I want to make sure we put a pin in that permitting process, because it is a whole lot easier with manufactured home, factory built ADUs. And so it's when you get that architect is talking, and you get the plans and they submit it to the permit, and then the permits come back, now you're ready to build. That's just the very beginning of the process of what is going to be on your property. And you still have a lot of decisions that you may or may not have made. Your comment a moment ago was where the homeowner is really not going to make a change, because if they do make a change, it's going to be very costly, because it's basically, you said, I want that, like that wonderful picture that's behind you, and that gets delivered. You're like, well, I want to change I don't want that dormer, that really cool little roof feature that you see above your head. I don't want that. Well, so sure, we can take it off, but it's going to be expensive. And if you were doing it with a general contractor, you might say, well, I don't, and that's not nearly as well. So I'm being very long-winded, because I really believe that I really want people to understand that there are some parallels, but then they very quickly diverge. And you need to understand that difference when you talk about manufactured homes, factory built, and site built. So that's very long, but what you covered when it comes to Tim and the transport and the setup, that's where it's just getting it from the factory to the site, delivering it, putting it on the site, and then basically when the setup is the foundation system and the utility connections, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that I think is, what is a typical timeline when someone starts to pick out all of their options once they start that conversation? What does that usually involve?
Oh, it can be anywhere from, gosh, depending on the person's timing and desirability factor, it could be anywhere from a week to several months. But we generally like to get them on board one way or the other in the first couple of weeks. And we do that, as I had mentioned, through our protocol of the phone chats and the Zoom meetings and the site evaluation. Once they understand those logistics, then it's easy to put them together with Tim and then start to spec out the home. Now, speccing out the home is very arduous, as I mentioned. It takes a lot of time and patience because you're dealing with colors and you're dealing with fixtures and you're dealing with appliances and you're dealing with where you want the doors to go, or do I want a slider there, or French doors here, do I want a patio or a deck? I mean, there's just so many variables. It's all over the place. So that's where it really comes in. I mean, that's where the devil is in the details. And Tim is a really patient guy, and he takes his time and he goes over it and over it and over it. And then again, he makes us all suffer through about 2 hours of line item by line item with the client, because they've got to initial every single line item. Then if there's any discrepancies, which there usually are, he always refers them to that order, and he goes, see, you signed it right here. So don't tell me it's something that you didn't want.
Right, because they might have forgotten about it, because there's a lot of detail. So you take that, they initial it, they have a copy of it, they're going to be able to refer to it so that you can protect yourself and them, because that's what you're doing. You're saying, I respectfully, we discussed this.
Yeah.
There was a lot. So that's why we want to be able to have that reference. And that's a really good way, because I know I'm guilty. I've been guilty of being that customer. I don't remember that. And then, here you go, David. I'm like, well, you're right. I did agree to that. Okay. So we can do that. That's interesting. The process that I think is also fascinating, and if you can talk a little bit about this, is the permitting process. Talk to us about what a manufactured home, ADU, what are the benefits when it comes to permitting?
Well, you'd mentioned it's a lot easier, and yes, it is, and it isn't. It just depends on the jurisdiction, as I'm sure you know, having been in my shoes for about as long as I have. I mean, each one of these guys at every permit counter you go into, you never know what to expect. And during COVID, it was a nightmare because they closed down so many permit departments. The county of San Diego is an example. They not only closed them down, they furloughed probably most of their counter help, almost all their experienced people. They retired. And the only way you could get into San Diego was to call them in advance. You couldn't have any eye contact or one-on-one contact with any real people. You had to take your permit down in an envelope, leave it in a box, and then hope that they would get back to you within a month. And sometimes they didn't. And you'd call them and you'd call them and you'd call them. And then they'd say, oh, well, we can't find it. Well, what do you mean you can't find it? Oh, it must have been locked. Okay, then you got to start the whole process over. So had clients, it took us 2 years to get through the permitting process. And they stuck with us by the some act of God. They ended up sticking with us, but it took us in some cases a couple of years for just a permit during COVID. Now, city of San Diego was even more of a nightmare. They were back 18 months. They only had 4 engineers. Well, of course, manufactured housing, now there's an advantage. You don't need an engineer. But yet the city of San Diego hadn't quite wrapped their arms around the difference between a manufactured and a modular. So they always sent it to engineering. No matter what we told them, how many times we told them, it always went to engineering. And then they always kicked it back saying, well, we're going to need this and we're going to need that. Then we always had to go back with our letters right from HCD stating that these are HUD manufactured homes. They supersede your jurisdictional authority. So in so many words, off, guys, leave me alone. Give me my permit. But anyway, thank God they're not all, and they are getting caught up. I mean, things
Good.
are kind of mellowing out, but that was hectic. Boy, if that didn't drive a few people out of the business or put a few homeowners on the sideline, nothing will.
John, I know that you and I talk a lot, and you are a great resource, and I really appreciate all the help that you've given me since we've known each other. But one of the things I found out is that during COVID, during that period of time, it drove so many contractors and manufactured home dealers out of business.
Yeah.
Because not only was the permits, but the factories to build the manufactured homes and the ADUs. I know that, and you're a representative of Silvercrest like me. I was getting quoted 18 months to 2 years.
Yep.
Maybe to get it built.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how? And thank goodness I was able to I do other work and to be able to kind of provide for myself and my wife. I don't know under how a licensed sales agent, just like a real estate agent, how they could make money. This is really interesting. I spoke with somebody who's high up in our industry, and the person said, well, they can sell used homes. And I was thinking to myself, having done that years ago, it is very difficult to compete with real estate agents because they're allowed to sell manufactured homes if they're not new, just used, which I have an issue with that. And that's why I want to pick your brain on that one. We're going to talk about real estate agents selling new manufactured homes, but that's the next one. But a licensed sales agent with HCD in the state of California to be able to sell new homes. If they were only relegated to sell used homes, they're now trying to compete against somebody who's a licensed real estate agent who has access to, I think one of the most powerful tools is the multiple listing service, the MLS. And I know that there are great websites called MH Village, but it doesn't compare. It doesn't compare to the MLS. And those people, I don't know how they survived. And I really felt for people whose professions were like Lenska and people that we know and we work with and we care about and that we love, that how were they able to earn a living during COVID? And it was just a nightmare. So even though that's my little sort of, quib about it, what do you think? And I know this is kind of a hard right turn on the topic, but when it comes to real estate agents, licensed real estate agents who are not licensed to sell manufactured homes, and the fact that they're not allowed to sell new homes, I personally think that there should be a specialty or something that allows them to have within their license the ability to sell a new manufactured home. And I think that would help us all. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I kind of agree with that. Being both a dealer and a real estate broker, I mean, I am inclined to agree with that. I don't understand the reasoning behind that, but then there's so many things about bureaucracy and just archaic laws and regulations that I don't understand. But in answer to that, there was a time when real estate agents couldn't even sell used homes. So I think it's a transitionary type of a situation where it took so many years for, real estate agents to be able to sell used homes. And I think at some point, there shouldn't be any reason why they shouldn't be allowed to sell new homes. I mean, I personally don't understand that myself, but I am in favor of it.
Yeah, and I also would to add on to that, I think that if there was a way that the California Association of Realtors could have a form, just like they do selling a used home, to be able to sell a new home, and that there should be a way that a dealer like ourselves should be able to compensate that real estate agent. I mean, I think that's where they kind of run into a wall, is like, how am I going to get paid for my work? And I think if they had the opportunity to see that they can earn a commission by selling a manufactured home, it's still going to go through a dealer, but being able to compensate them, I think there should be some mechanism or tool that allows that.
I think therein lies the rub, David. I think that because only a dealer can sell a brand new one, because only a dealer has the dealer's license to work directly with the factory. The real estate agent or broker doesn't have that ability. Right. So the dealer buys from the factory. They're responsible for the MCO and the CO that has to be you know, relegated back to the manufacturer so they know that that home's been responsibly sited on a property, right? So I think that's part of that logistic. I think, and there, but I mean, I see no reason why the dealer, as you said, can't work with a real estate agent. If a real estate agent brings me a deal, you say, hey, I got a buyer for that new home you just installed. But I can't give you a commission because you're not a licensed real estate. I can give you a referral fee, but even that's not,
Yeah.
you know, ethical, I guess, according to standards.
Right. Yeah, they have to either be with you, either with you as a licensed agent, whether on the HUD side, HCD, because HUD is Housing and Urban Development. That's the federal entity.
Yep.
HCD, Housing Community Development, is the state agency that regulates our licenses and licenses for manufactured home dealers and sales agents. And that there's again, I go back to it, silos. And it's like, okay, folks, we need to kind of integrate a little bit better, because right now, as I mentioned a moment ago, most people that are working in real estate are real estate agents. That's what their license is. That's how they make their living. And this is something manufactured homes, factory built is over here on the side, because typically most of us only work in mobile home parks.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a very small market, relatively speaking, with the housing market in the state of California. And it would be wonderful. So maybe because you and I are both active in, you know, smart and intelligent things, that might be something we could look at. But I want to get back to, because we only have so much time and we're already through half of this. So the experience with ADUs, getting them ordered, delivered, we talked a little bit about that. But let's spend a couple of minutes talking about tiny homes, because you are a licensed through the Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, to sell park models. So tell us a little bit about what that is and what that process involves.
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest, total transparency. I got my RV dealer's license because I was representing Back Porch Homes. And
Yes.
As you know, Back Porch Homes is no longer. So that was kind of a disappointment, because I thought those guys were a good bunch of guys. I really liked
I did too.
All those folks. They were just terrific folks. But anyway, things happened, and it was partly, probably mostly attributed to the pandemic. But also on the bright side, Crest, as you know, Silvercrest is also a park model purveyor. So
Yes.
I do have another resource there. But long story short, there is no market for park models or tiny homes in San Diego County other than the city of San Diego. They will allow them. Yep, that's right. So, I mean, I can have all the qualifications in the world, but if there's no market for them because your jurisdictions aren't allowing them, back to square one.
So is it the city and the county, or?
No, just the city of San Diego is the only city in the county of San Diego that will allow a tiny home or a park model. But what I found,
which with the county of San Diego, is huge.
Oh, it is. I mean, I'm in the county myself where I live.
All the way from the border of Mexico, all the way north up to Camp Pendleton.
Correct.
So that's Fallbrook. So that's way. So it's this huge area.
Huge. All the way east to I mean, way out in the desert. You know, it's a vast county. It's one of the biggest counties.
And they are not allowing the installation of tiny homes to be used as ADUs.
Nope. They're bootlegged in all the time. I mean, people are like out in Awanga and some of these far-reaching, places that are really out in remote areas. People are bootlegging them in all the time, and that's another issue. You got all these people bootlegging them in illegally, and you got dealers selling to these people that know that they're bootlegging them in illegally, and there's no accountability there. So code enforcement can't and they won't keep up with it. It's like a cop not wanting to go into Harlem because he knows he's going to get shot. These code enforcement people don't want to go into some of these places where these Hell's Angels are, manufacturing their chemicals. So
that would not be a fun situation at all. So I think that with tiny homes, and I'm not a big, and I recently was at the Silvercrest factory, which happens to be in Corona, California. People, if again, you're watching, listening to this, and you are in the San Diego County area, and you want to see these like a models, they have a small village of model homes at the Silvercrest site in Corona, California. It's not that far from anybody in Southern California. We can meet in Corona, the great little hole in the wall Mexican restaurant. We can have, for lunch afterwards.
Yep.
And you can look at these models of tiny homes. And they also have a manufactured home model that they just finished that is gorgeous. And this thing's about just under 1,400 square feet to look at a traditional manufactured home. But then what they have is this example of an ADU, single section, and it has 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. Now the bedroom's a little bit small, but it is a representation of what you could probably one of the best executions of an ADU, because it is and I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about the section when you're dealing with just one section of a home as opposed to 2 sections. One section, there are some pretty significant benefits when it comes to the site work.
Well, more so the setup and installation. The site work's pretty much the site work. I mean, you're going to do whatever your infrastructure is, that footprint. It doesn't matter the size of the footprint. You still got to do that.
Water,
infrastructure.
sewer, gas, electric.
Yep. So all that's pretty rudimentary, but the actual cost is significant. The savings, going to a single section, you're not paying twice for delivery. You're not paying twice for setup. You got everything all in one module, so you don't have to worry about connecting them, the marriage line, and all the other things that go on with trying to blend the drywall in, and the flooring and all that. You don't want to put the flooring down till you get it. Well, you can't put the flooring down till you get both sections in place, and therein lies a lot of problems too with flooring. So I mean, there's just all these little tiny issues that come up. If you can do a single section with an ADU, you're way better off. We're doing one right now. We're in the process getting ready to. Well, I think Linska's already got it permitted. It's a because of the size and the configuration of the lot, we had no choice. It's a 12 by 46 or 48, so it's got to be a long, skinny one, and able to for it to be able to fit on that particular parcel where it's going. But that's some of the advantages of working with a single section manufactured home. You can make them all shapes and sizes. You can go as wide. Street legal width is 15.5 feet wide without the overhangs on the roof. So if you can work within those parameters, a 15.5 foot wide section is a pretty wide section. I mean, you figure a lot of regular, like a 20 by 40, 800 square foot manufactured home, right? It's only 5 feet different.
Right.
And you can do a 15 by 40, and you've got yourself 600 square feet. 15 by 50, you got yourself 750 square feet. Sure, they look a little rectangular-ish on the lot, but if you don't have the right spot, if you're limited as to where you can place it, these options are there.
And I think, and that's the part where, and I'm so happy that you touched on that. The site work with a single section, everything's done except for just connecting the utilities, which is basically the outside. Now, with any manufactured or factory built product that uses drywall, during the transportation process from the factory to the home and then getting it sited, it's kind of like going through its own little earthquake as it kind of rattles and shakes down the freeway. And so you're going to see little cracks on the drywall, which is super easy to repair, and it's just something that happens. But with a single section, that's about it. Connect the utilities, make sure that all the drywall is nice and clean, make sure that all the appliances are powered up and going. You're not having to wait for the insulation, the rough electrical, the drywall, the electrical, all of those hundreds of things that have to be done for a site built construction. It shows up and has been done. And the other beauty of this is what happens at the factory. So the factory is completely different because it is just being built within a environmentally controlled envelope. It's not exposed to the rain. And I know that the construction jobs that are happening here in Burbank, I see them all the time, where we had this rain that came through about a month ago, and all this raw lumber and materials got soaked. Because some of the jobs were covered up with, the blue tarps, but a lot of them weren't. So I think that's a great advantage about it, and there are many. But let's talk about the disadvantages. If you think that there are any disadvantages to using a factory built or manufactured home ADU.
Well, you kind of hit a nerve with the wet lumber thing. I got to tell you this story. We were sitting out on a job site once. This is years ago. This is one of my summertime jobs when I was going to college. I was working construction, and we're sitting on a pile of lumber that had just been delivered and eating lunch. And while we were sitting there, it was swarmed with termites. The pile of lumber was. We had to get up and move. These things just came in and phew, like a swarm of bees and attacked that lumber. So that lumber is termite ridden sometimes before it even gets framed. And then you got to worry about, especially wet, and now not just lumber that gets rained on, it's lumber that's too freshly cut. So it's still green and wet and heavy, and it gets twisted and warps and cracks on the ends. And by the time you get that, all the waste, all the tails that are cut off, trying to find a 2x4 that's, you could make it into a stud, right? You're cutting tails off and cutting the cracks off, and so you're working with untrue pieces of lumber. It's a pain in the neck. So yeah, I mean, the advantages of using a manufactured option where all the lumber is kiln dried, it's all straight. You're not going to have any of those bending, twisting, cracking, warping, green, wet problems. Everything's built on a jig in a manufacturing facility, so it all comes out the same size. If you go through a factory tour, and I've got them, I've got videos of them, I'm sure you do too. You look on the floors, you don't see a lot of waste. They build these things on a jig. Everything's pre-cut. They know exactly what they're doing. Same with the cabinetry. Same with the flooring, the roofing, everything that's built. They're perfecting it. They're getting it down to where it's almost zero waste. So you talk about green and energy efficient. That's one of the main reasons that factory built housing is so much less expensive. You're not using nearly as much. Well, yeah, you're losing about 10 to 15% of site built lumber. Labor.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's my connection or we've just lost you a little bit, just the last 5 seconds. So I'll edit that out, but we were talking about you were just, the last comment you just said, if you could repeat it.
About
The kiln dried ends and the tails and the waste. So there might be about a 10% difference in what a factory has waste as opposed to a site has waste.
Yeah, well, I mean, overall, you're saving yourself a considerable amount of time and money by going factory built. Factory built labor is a lot more expensive than field labor. I mean, you're paying your specialty guys on the job site, your plumbers, your electricians, your carpenters, your insulators. They're all being paid sometimes union wages,
right?
Or darn close to it. If they're not in the union, they're still up there pretty competitively. So you don't get that in a manufacturing facility. You're saving yourself a lot of money by going factory built.
And I agree with that 100%. And if it's an option that that works, you need to, as a homeowner or investor, give that factory built options a serious consideration. And unfortunately for our industry, there's just not as many strong vocal voices such as ourselves. And I really hope that this momentum continues to grow. Wanted to talk a little bit, and it just occurred to me. I didn't have it in my notes to ask you, and I got a bunch of them. Is the difference between the different factories in Southern California? Now, you and I mentioned Silvercrest. There's also Skyline. There's Hallmark. There's Fleetwood, and there are other factories that are out there that, unless you're in the business, you may not know. But there are differences between factories that build these. And can you talk a little bit about that, or what your thoughts are on if you think there's a big difference or no difference?
Well, yeah, without naming names, there are manufacturers that I mean, Silvercrest has been around for like 50 years. That one facility of theirs up there, that's a 10-acre facility. 5 acres is under one roof.
Yep.
I mean, everything gets built inside that plant. They had a reputation, I mean, ever since I've been a dealer, which has been about 30 plus years, of being the Cadillac in the industry. I mean, they are like the top of the line that there is. And that's why we've always been pretty loyal to Silvercrest. I mean, we can sell Cavco, we can sell Skyline. We're authorized to sell other lines if we'd like. We like Silvercrest for primarily what you stated, right up in Corona. It's right down the 15 freeway. It's not coming from Arizona. It's not coming from Northern California, where you're going to get a lot of road wear. You talk about that 7-point earthquake that you
Yes.
discussed. That goes all the way from wherever it starts to ship to the job site. And I mean, it can be pretty significant. The more the more road wear it gets, the more retrofitting and repair work you're going to have to do on your installation. But by and large, the way they built their homes, I just love it. They're all their cabinets are built on site. They're all built under that roof.
And
It's
they're one of
real
the few
wood.
that does that. They're one of the few factories that do that.
They're one of the few factories that does it, and it's real wood. It's not fake wood. It's not compressed particle board or OSB board. It's the real stuff. You want maple, you get maple. You want, whatever it is you want, they'll make it for you. So that's what I like about it too. All their doors, they're the real deal. They're not just fake hollow core doors. Now you can
Right,
get
'cause
them.
there's a lot of products you can get, from overseas suppliers or domestic suppliers that they're going to try to cut some corners. They're going to try to be
Yep.
as efficient as they can. And I want to echo your sentiments about Silvercrest. Is they are regarded as one of the best and most premier builders of factory built ADUs and homes. There are others that are out there that are very good, but there's also companies, and again, don't we want to name anybody, but there are some that aren't as good. And I think that if you talk about manufactured home dealers and our industry being a niche market, dealing with somebody and talking to somebody like Crest Backyard Homes, either yourself or Lenska or Tim that is with you and your team of people, or somebody who's going to be with myself, or there's some great people out in the East County, in Hemet called Ma Williams. I think Kelly Williams Walsh also has a really wonderful team. They sell Silvercrest.
Yep.
And so if you have decades old companies that have been working in this industry, and we all choose to have certain alignments with factories, that kind of speaks for itself.
Well, that's why I came up with the name Crest Homes. And everybody used to ask me, are you a spinoff? Are you affiliated with Silvercrest? Well, yeah, I'm a dealer.
I think that's brilliant because it does help a lot. I think what are some of the things that homeowners, when they're trying to evaluate, because I know we just have a couple more minutes, when they're trying to evaluate their ADUs, what kind of suggestions or advice would you have for somebody who's just like, I don't know which way to go, I'm still a little bit overwhelmed? How do we bring those people into considering a factory built ADU as opposed to, and not saying that they shouldn't go with an architect or a designer and a local GC, but how would you kind of just say, hey folks, here are some serious things to consider?
Well, I got to be honest with you on that one. I kind of look at my clientele like a politician looks at politics. You've got so much money and so much time to spend on campaigning. If you're a Democrat, are you going to put all your money and all your time and all your effort into trying to get Republicans in your camp? Or are you going to spend your time, money, and effort working with the Democrats that are already in your camp?
Right.
And that's kind of the way I look at our business. If after the first meeting or so, people are still on that fence, I just say, okay, folks, I don't think we're a fit for you. So maybe you should consider going with a site-built option. Love to introduce you to my son or my daughter. They specialize in those fields. Can't tell you how many people appreciate that, number one. Number two, I can't tell you over the years how many people have circled back and said, you know what? I've gone down all those roads. I checked out all those different referrals you gave me, and you're the best deal. So sometimes you just let the hand play itself out.
I think that's probably some of the best. I bet one of the best perspectives I've heard in a long time, because so few people have that, to be able to say, hey, it may not, you still need to consider site built. I'm not going to tell you that we're the best or this is the best, and you need to kind of figure that out for yourself, because everybody should be a little bit skeptical of everything that is told to them, and then they spend the time kind of doing the homework. And I think that is probably one of the best recommendations I've heard, is what you just said. It may not be the best. Go explore, and if you come back, we're going to welcome you with open arms, and we're happy to, talk about moving forward.
Chapter 2.
I think that it's going to be an interesting time. With the last couple minutes that we have, you pay some attention to the pending legislation in the state of California, right?
Yeah, only because I have to.
One of the things that I see coming down with ADUs is going to be, the governor hasn't signed it, is going to be 1033. So AB 1033 by Assemblymember Ting really is going out there and stretching the boundaries. And I think what this AB 1033, this right now, it is September 21st, 2023. So kind of like a little timestamp on this. If the governor signs it, it's going to allow for the sale of an ADU on your property as a condo.
Right. Yep.
And that is, I think, where the state and the lobbyists have looked at SB 9, where you could actually split your property if it's in the right area and it meets all these criteria, and you could have its own APN number and you could sell it off. And there were a lot of people, wasn't getting a lot of traction. Was not very popular.
Right.
Not a lot of people were doing SB 9 splits because why? They're so expensive.
Exactly.
It takes so long.
Yep.
So now comes Assemblymember Ting, and I think some very smart lobbyists that are out there said, let's turn them into condos. So it's, I think, it's to the governor's desk. It's passed both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, with the state of California. And if it's signed, holy heck, John, people are going to be able to sell their backyards.
Hey, you know what? I'm all for it. I mean, as a real estate broker, are you kidding me? I mean, that opens up a whole plethora of a whole new real estate market. I think it's, personally, I like it. Now, there's certain things, I think the government tends to have some overreach in this industry. And I do think that they have pushed certain things too far, like SB 9 and SB 10, where you're taking now myself, I live on a nice piece of property and in kind of a rural part of North San Diego County. And I've been here for 40 years now. I'll tell you now, I would hate to be able to take that property under SPlex. I mean, nothing would make me sadder. So
right.
That's the NIMBY in me, right? I mean, I want to see that happen in my backyard. But the entrepreneur part of me says, hey, I'm all for it, man. This is going to be a boon to real estate. It's going to open some doors.
Well, I think that's the part that I was talking to some people yesterday at the association's annual meeting, where it's like, okay, real estate people, you may think this is going to be a big game changer, or you may not like it. You might be against it. And I think that they lobbied against AB 1033. But I think that if you look at it from an entrepreneurial lens and a sales agent lens, right now you have rising interest rates that is slowing demand, reducing the amount of inventory, but the people aren't selling, because if they sell, where are they going to buy?
Exactly.
So you have a very stagnant market. 1033 is going to allow somebody to build like us. We could get a project done in under a year, start to finish, permit the keys, and say, here you go. So if you are somebody who's not using their backyard and you don't mind somebody living there, you could make a lot of money by selling your backyard to somebody that wants to put an ADU there. And then now it's going to be a condo. It's going to have conventional financing. You're going to have all of the normal attributes of selling real estate like you would just a condo. Again, we talked about this in the beginning of our conversation. Real estate agents are now going to be involved. You could be a manufactured home dealer or sales agent selling that product to that homeowner, and then the real estate agent gets to sell it. And I think that that is something where everybody wins. So, and I think that is where I hope can see some traction, particularly on the factory built, manufactured home side, because we're going to be able to get those products out that much more quickly and be that much more efficient and much more consistent. So if you are a developer, you're an investor, and you want to kind of look at those kind of options, John with Crest Backyard Homes is in San Diego County. He goes out to some sections of Riverside into Orange County, and his team is a true team of professionals. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to walk you through the process, whether you're doing 1, 2, 10, or 20, or if you're a homeowner just looking to maybe build something for your own property. You want an ADU, you have maybe a tighter budget and you want to kind of get the biggest bang for your buck. This is something I think you really need to consider, which is the factory built option. John, what are some sort of closing thoughts or ideas, or anything that you want to share and to kind of put on this webinar? I'm going to leave the last couple minutes to you.
I've got one question for you. This is probably going to go right back to you, but you're a lot more in the loop on some of this stuff than I am, because I really don't have time to keep up on a lot of the legislative issues that are at hand right now. But one thing I am curious about, nobody's ever really discerned to me whether or not you're going to actually, are you buying condo, just airspace, just the part that the home sits on, or are you actually buying some of the yard space? Do you know how that works yet?
I think that has not yet been defined. In fact, we were having conversations where you may actually be able to identify sections of land as opposed to having just an interest in the entire property and having some delineation. I have not seen the code sections that actually are identifying that. But I was talking to a mortgage broker, and they were who's up on this and saying, well, we believe that you're going to be able to own the land. Now, if that, and you can identify a section, that means there's going to have to be some language specifying and identifying that land. And I don't know how they're going to do that, as opposed to if you have a homeowners association and a condo, what you typically do require. If you're 5 units or less, you don't have to have anything recorded with the state. Oh, I think that was a big deal. I
think they'll probably have to do a lot split. If you're gonna have a specific parcel of property on another piece of land, then that you're going to probably have to go through a splitting process. The same
and I hope that they don't. And so I think that's where they'll probably just have an HOA set up. There'll be 2 members, the person who lives in the primary house and the one who's in the back. I think they're going to hopefully streamline it. I know that there's a lot of people that are looking at it to try to have some boilerplate templates, and that there'll be some attorneys who specialize in real estate that will hopefully have some documents that they're going to be able to give us to have homeowners look at, so that everybody understands, who has what rights.
So when you say HOA split, now, does that mean if my piece of property here, if I were to allocate or appropriate a parcel or a portion of my property for a condo, would we own all the property in common?
Yes.
Or see that I'm not sure about that one.
I'm not sure about that either, but I think that where they could and they should identify that this ADU has the right to occupy and maintain this area, and long we have this easement that allows me to walk from let's say wherever they may park their car, and it may be close to the primary house. I have this easement that allows me to get to my property.
Ingress and egress. You'd have to have that. But again, to do that and do it legally and friendly, you're going to have some kind of a lot split delineating what the lot lines are going to be. Because if you want, like you're talking about, an easement, you're going to have a little parking space. You may want a little bit of a yard. You want to be able to
Right.
get out and recreate and have a little barbecue in a
Fence.
setting area, right? So that's real estate.
Yeah,
And-
and I think that is where it's going to come down to the devil's in the details, like you said a moment ago.
Yeah.
Really, how the state parses that out, I think is going to be critical for everybody to understand just how that's done. And so
So if they were to come out and tell you like, okay, you own you own an acre, all right, so you're going to put a condo on it, you're going to have to give half of your acre to that condo. That might not be very friendly for a lot of people that own that acre. They might
it
say,
might
"Oh, I'm
not
willing to-"
be. But if they could delineate it out to say, hey,
Yeah.
I own an acre, but I'm only going to delineate out 10,000 or let's say 7,000 square feet.
Right. That would be, okay, that's kind of where I'm going with all this. I think that's kind of what it's going to get down to. And if they do that, then they are going to have to do a lot split, because then they'll have to go through certain logistics like setbacks, boundaries, easements, utility, the whole thing.
So
and it's going to be kind of, it's the details there, the details.
and I'm going to use what you just said, John, round two. When it passes, we're going to have to dive in this.
Yes.
And we may need to do a panel discussion, bringing on some of the people that we know to really kind of get into it. And I think with your connections that you have throughout the state of California and what I have, I think we're going to be able to bring a really wonderful panel to discuss the opportunities with AB 1033.
It's above my pay grade.
We all right now it's above everybody's practically, but we're going to understand it. So for everybody who's watching, who's listening to this, thank you very much for taking the time and spend with John and myself. Do reach out to either one of us about manufactured factory built ADUs. And if you're looking for something maybe a little bit bigger, we sell manufactured homes that go up to over 3,000 square feet, and they are pretty spectacular. John, thank you very much for all of your time, sir. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. I wish you all the success.
Let's have an off the air discussion about the association we're talking about.
Let's do it. I'll make it happen soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.